Greetings and konnichiwa, and welcome to the Onyx Tavern. I'm your host, Rick the Barkeep, bringing you episode 221 here at the Tavern, where today we're going to talk about one of the greatest duos in Power Rangers history, Rito and Goldar. Yes, everybody thinks of Bulk and Skull, Squat and Babu, but more often than not, when I think about the pairings that they put in Power Rangers that probably shouldn't work, but does more times than not, it is the Rito and Goldar duo. And maybe this will be a big surprise to some people, probably not, but I actually like Rito as a character. I think he's a lot of fun. I think he's interesting. He's got a cool design, and it's just kind of nice to have that kind of, I wouldn't say fun character or even comedic, but kind of that levity in Zed's throne room. Of course, the big problem is that there is too much levity in Zed's throne room, but we'll go ahead and get to that. I think it was very interesting on the writers when season 3 came along to really even introduce Rito as a character to begin with, and even go ahead and pair him up with Goldar. And it's honestly an unusual genesis on how we got to that point. Because first we got to kind of start with Goldar. Look at Goldar in the first season, how he's introduced into the series, and then essentially how he ends up by the time he really departs the series in Zeo. Yes, he was last in Power Rangers in Space, but for those 4 years and up until, the We're Back, that's where Goldar's presence was in the series. And Goldar changes significantly in the show, and I don't necessarily think that was a good thing to go ahead and happen. But his change throughout the series was just so odd that by the time, like, if you watch the first few episodes of Mighty Morphin, then you skip immediately to season 3, you're like, what happened to this guy? What changed it? And part of that change was the introduction of Rito as a character to be essentially a comic foil for Goldar, even though the Goldar has basically devolved into this comedic character himself. So we're all over the place on these characters, and I just kind of want to, start with Goldar. I'm going to talk about his evolution first, and how we got from fierce, loyal warrior to Rita to basically bumbling sidekick, because it's honestly a very dramatic change, a real, almost in a way, a tragic fall, if you will. Because again, we introduce him in the very first episode of Power Rangers. What is he able to prove that he can do? That he's extremely powerful, that he can take on all 5 Rangers at once, that he can battle the Megazord and go toe-to-toe with them. And if it wasn't for the fact that he was retreating every episode, he might have won. Who knows? He is the most powerful warrior at Rita's disposal, other than the typical monster of the day. He has a fierce rivalry with Jason, he eventually has a rivalry with Tommy, mainly because he wants to prove himself to be that powerful warrior. And how do you do that? You go against the most powerful. First it was Jason, and then Tommy comes in with the Green Ranger powers, so you do see that shift from Jason's personal nemesis to Tommy's personal nemesis. And this is consistent through, the first 60 episodes of the series. He is this monstrous creature. He doesn't have that much personality to him. I'll go ahead and grant that. He is fiercely loyal to Rita. I think that's one of the attributes that he has throughout the series. Then, it's my queen, my mistress, whatever, and that's consistent with him. And of course, by the time we get to the Green Ranger saga, he has Scorpina to back him up. They become a duo. Now, yes, in Zoo Ranger, they are husband and wife. That does not carry over into Power Rangers, but basically you have 2 powerful warriors fighting alongside each other. So by the time the end of Season 1 comes, you have these 2 major threats, these, powerful characters. And let's consider, where Goldar's place is in Rita's pantheon of villains, because you got Rita, who is the leader, Goldar, the fierce enforcer, along with Scorpina. You have Squat and Babu, who are the comedic duo, And you have what I would honestly describe as the neutral character in all this of Finster. So you have that, that gradient. You have that range, starting with Goldar as that powerful evil warrior to the evil comedic side characters with Finster somewhere in the middle. So Rita's villains, Rita's backup basically has a good spectrum of different levels of evil, if you will, and it all starts with Goldar, and I thought that was pretty good with the character. You have that that consistency. You have that understanding of who he is as a villain. Now, what ends up happening in season two with the introduction of Lord Zed and the mutiny, it's honestly kind of strange looking back at it now. Because again, if you watch those first 60 episodes, then you watch the premiere of season two, it's really kind of odd what ends up happening. Now, the introduction of Lord Zed himself is kind of odd when you put it into context, because Rita calls herself the Empress of all evils. She's incredibly powerful on her own, and she, of course, is the nemesis of Zordon. Then we come to find out that she has a boss, that she is subservient to another, that this character is Lord Zed. Now, narratively speaking, that works well because it says, you thought Rita was bad, this is the person who Rita is even afraid of, that Rita bows down to. So that's very significant, that's very important. And of course, yes, I know in the comics, it's kind of retcon that she is Zed's enforcer, that he is the emperor and she is just one of his many generals in his army essentially. But we're not here to really talk about the comics. We're going to primarily talk about the TV show. But when Zed is introduced, is then kind of revealed in a way that Goldar is even more loyal to Lord Zed, and he does undergo something of a personality change. In a way, if you look at how he interacts and treats Rita, she is my queen, but he always talks to her with respect, and a lot of times, I mean, it is like a subservient to a supervisor, hey boss, and all that kind of stuff. But there isn't really any type of cowering to Rita, basically. I wouldn't even say that's their equals, that they know their relationship. He shows the respect that she deserves. But when Zed comes into the picture, Goldar is nothing but, I mean, he describes him as, like, I believe the sniveling one. And then that's like, if you gave that description to Goldar in the first season, that wouldn't fit. I was like, no, that's more like a squat Babu character. But no, that's how they describe Goldar once Zed introduces him. And really, throughout the rest of season two, really, even up to past the wedding, Goldar becomes more of a lackey than a fierce warrior. I mean, what we have is that Zed is sending out the putties and Goldar leads them, but Goldar does less one-on-one combat with the Rangers. He is less involved, and frankly, if you watch a lot of the scenes of him in the throne room, he's just sitting there agreeing with Lord Zed, brown nosing and kissing his butt, whatever. I mean, I guess he's truly afraid of Lord Zed. I mean, everybody's got to be afraid of something, and he just goes on this unusual personality change where it's just kind of like, I'm fierce, I'm confident, I'm powerful. Oh no, Lord Zed's here. I must, hey, boss, that's a good looking tie you got today. I mean, that's how his personality changes, which I find is incredibly odd, and I can't really understand why that had happened. Why the writers decided. I mean, obviously you got powerful Lord Zed. Maybe they felt they didn't need Goldar to fill that role anymore because they push Squat, Babu, and Finster into the background. Those three characters are barely around. They last until the beginning of Zeo, but again, they're just not really there doing anything. And you need someone for Zed to interact with on a consistent basis, and that is going to be Goldar. I suppose maybe the thinking was two fierce characters can't really talk to each other that way, or can't interact that much. And of course, they completely got rid of Scorpina, which I still do not understand, even after my interview with Sabrina Liu, why they decided to jettison Scorpina completely from the series. But Scorpina is another discussion altogether. So again, from season 1, season 2, he goes through this personality change. And then what's even odder is that when we get to the wedding and Rita returns, he really despises Rita and dislikes her. And this is the point in the series in which Lord Zed goes from his evil badass personality to becoming the domesticated Lord Zed that we know throughout the rest of the series. I mean, frankly, when he goes to sleep before Rhea puts in that potion, the true Lord Zed essentially dies on that table, if you think about it. That the character he's replaced with is not the same Lord Zed that we came to know, basically. That he did have a significant personality shift when he married Rita, and that was probably attributed to the love potion that she made. Essentially, I mean, I would say that yes, he's become less effective, and of course, Linkara made the argument that he was more successful in defeating the Rangers, destroying their Zords and whatnot, after he was married to Rita, but at the cost of, his own personality, at the cost of his soul, in a way, that they really changed him. And again, to fit in with this, they changed Goldar as well, to where he doesn't trust Rita, he hates Rita, he no longer has a loyalty to Rita they had in the first season. And again, comparing season 1, season 2, he's not really the same character. He's not acting in character. When he sees Rita, he immediately distrusts her. And, by the time we get season 3, and he finds out that there was a love potion involved, the first thing he's trying to do is to discredit Rita and say, hey, Zed, this is what ended up happening, and what are you going to go ahead and do about it now? That's the kind of thing that he would not have done in the first season. That he would have been fiercely loyal to Rita. If Zed had come in and he had kept that season 1 personality, then he would be loyal to Rita, but subservient to Lord Zed. And that's what it is. He changed the loyalties, and for some reason that made him weaker in personality. Then we introduce Rito in the 3rd season, and this is where things get a little like a sitcom. And again, this is something else that's pointed out by Linkara. I mean, look at essentially the 4 villains that we have at the beginning of season 3. We have Zed, who's now been domesticated. Rita, who is basically, a much more annoying version of Lucy as a witch. And then you have the bumbling, idiotic brother, Rito, and then you have Goldar, who is just sliding and sliding more into that almost incompetent personality that he has. That when you actually watch the rest of the series, he never engages the Rangers again. There's that time they turn giant at the beginning of Mighty Morphin Alien Rangers, but he never goes 1-to-1 with the Thunder Megazord or the Ninja Megazord on his own. Heck, in Rito's introduction, when he brings all those monsters, he's the one that ends up destroying the Thunder Zords. He's the one that goes toe-to-toe with the Ninja Megazord and just, retreats at the final moment. Rito has surpassed him in that regard as a fierce and powerful warrior, yet Rito's an idiot through and through, basically. And they decide to pair these two together for the rest of the series. That really, after Rito's introduced, while Squat and Babu are still around in the background, if there's a job that needs to be done, it's up to Rito and Goldar now, and if something screws up, it's because of Rito and Goldar. Let's not forget that during Mighty Morphin Alien Rangers, these two were tasked with planting a bomb in the command center by searching the catacombs under the command center, and it takes them all 10 episodes to find their way around with this bomb. That, every other episode we're checking in on what they're doing, and basically they're just, lost. Would season 1 Goldar have been lost Not I don't believe so, because season 1 Goldar was not incompetent as season 3, season 4, and Alien Rangers Goldar. Um, and I wonder, again, I like Rito as a character. I think he's a lot of fun. I do think he's funny. I like his interactions with Lord Zed. But I question why they decided to bring in a comedic character to the cast that we already had. To, again, the domesticated Zed, Rita and Goldar, sniveling Goldar at that point, why we needed a funnier character at that time. Um, and I've said this a number of times before, is that heroes are defined by the villains in which they fight. Again, the best example of that is Batman and the Joker. How the Joker is the polar opposite, and of course, it's that whole escalation thing they talked about in Batman Begins. You gotta amp it up. You have to fight up to the level of your competition, so forth. And what does it say about the Power Rangers, particularly in the third season, when the villains that they fight are essentially these goofy morons that squabble each other like it's a sitcom? Um, why introduce an additional comedic element? Now, honestly, we do get a character like Master Vile later, Rito and Rita's father, who is a little bit more menacing, but throughout season 3, it is pretty much the idiots versus the teenagers. And looking back on season 3, and I always liked season 3 for the longest time. I think a lot of it has to do with the Kaku Ranger aesthetic of the Zords and the monsters and things like that. But objectively, not to mention the less reliance on Sentai footage, but objectively looking back at it, the problem I have is that the villains are just not as interesting as they used to be. Sure, I get a chuckle, and do I enjoy watching them? I do, but it's just unsatisfying to see these characters where they are. And I wonder, again, why introduce Rita at that point? Why even introduce him as the brother of Rita in that series? Because here's the interesting thing about it, is that they really don't have any interactions together as brother and sister. Um, I mean, he's introduced as the brother in the first episode, and that's what gets him into the palace. And I assume that that's probably what the deal was, is that they introduced him so there wouldn't have to be much explanation as to why Zed and Rita would trust him. If a new villain comes along, you have to build up that trust. Why should we trust you? Why are you in here? Are you going to backstab me? I mean, that's obviously what they did with Deviant in Lost Galaxies. They introduced this new villain, and he had to gain the trust of Trakina and Scorpius. But Goldar, I mean, excuse me, Rito coming in as the brother of Rita just eliminates, I guess, a lot of work on the writer's part, but which is odd for a 4-part story in which he was introduced along with the ninja powers. It's just kind of odd in that regard, that they would introduce this character and, like, that's it, he's already a part of the team. And again, he is formidable. He brings the Tengas with him, which I believe is a great addition to the series. I'll have to say the Tengas are one of my favorite, if not my favorite, foot soldiers throughout the series. And of course, we got Rito to blame for that. Um, but yeah, there's no interaction of brother and sister. They don't talk about past times, really. They don't act like siblings. I mean, if you did not know that they were brother and sister, then the series really gives you no indication of that. And I just would have liked to see a little bit more interaction between those two. Otherwise, what's the point of being the brother and sister in the first place? Um, and again, I wonder why he couldn't be a menacing villain, because in my mind, and I've said this a number of times, I think one of the bigger issues with Power Ranger villains is a lot of the uninteresting ones, the ones that are not very memorable, are the ones that are in the rubber suits that don't have a human actor with them. Now, Rito is the exception to that rule simply because of his voice actor, and I think a little bit of the clever writing that they gave him. They made him interesting, but I wonder why they didn't introduce a human character in that role. Or they decided not to go ahead and bring back Scorpina for a second or third time, I guess. Why they felt the need to have a comedic character and then pair that character up with Goldar, because that seems to have been the plan. is that they were phasing out the other villains, that Goldar is essentially in the background, and to get him more active in plots, they had to introduce some sort of foil for him, some sort of partner for him to work with. Now, again, the logical choice is Scorpina. They didn't go that route, and heck, even in the first movie, they gave him Morton to work off of. But Goldar is not that fierce and powerful warrior. He is introduced in the film as just a lackey who will cow down to whoever happens to be in charge at the moment. Again, his personality in the movie is a lot akin to the way he's portrayed in the third season. That seems to be the beginning of it right there, and less like he was in the first season of the show. Because again, Goldar just kind of lost his luster, and probably what it should have been is if they were going to team him up, it should have been like this. You can't have, I think, you either need to have two fierce warriors or a fierce warrior and bumbling one, not two bumbling ones. Because for all the charm that gives us as a duo, they're not particularly threatening, I will go ahead and say. I mean, be honest. Past the first season for Goldar and past the Ninja Quest for Rito, were those two really even threatening at all? I mean, heck, what's interesting about Rito in this regard is when the Rangers first encounter him, they're like, just another skull-based monster, whatever. We're going to take out the Zords. We're going to go ahead and beat him. They really don't, they're not intimidated by Rito. And frankly, because of the strategy they utilized, the multiple monsters, it wasn't Rito that really defeated them. It was the Rito and the team of monsters, a strategy in which, Rito and Zed have never really employed before. And then throughout the rest of the series, it's pretty obvious that the Rangers don't treat Rito as being as a badass threat, and even Goldar they don't treat in that same regard anymore. That might have something to do with the fact that Jason had left the team, and maybe because Tommy got more powerful, that there wasn't that familiarity with Goldar with a lot of the remaining characters in that same capacity. Obviously, you got Billy and Kimberly still. And I forget where I was going with this. Okay, so again, they don't look at Goldar and Rito as a threat anymore. So you have two idiots essentially becoming the threat, bringing the Tengas down, and you got the monster of the day. Why couldn't they keep Goldar's personality as that fierce warrior and then have introduced Rito as that bumbling idiot? Or vice versa, you make Goldar this essentially fallen warrior, and you get this fierce warrior Rito, who happens to be the brother of his former queen, to come in, and he's fierce, and he's like, dude, look at you. You are pathetic. You used to be the best, and I looked up to you, and look at you now. You're a fat slob or something like that. I mean, that would be interesting, because then you can have some character change and character growth. Because, yes, Goldar had character change, but I wouldn't argue they had character growth. He really regressed as a character. He became, I'm going to say he became less interesting, again, once we hit Season 2, and he only became, I think, relevant and interesting to a degree because he was paired with Rito, who is a far more interesting character than him. So again, it's an odd series of events, and I don't know why they did this. I really tried to look for some information on why they decided to change Goldar, and everything I've told you has really just been my speculation on the matter. I don't know why this happened. I don't know why the writers decided to go ahead and do this. Now, again, I am aware that they changed Zed because they said he was too frightening for young children, which, again, I'm still pissed off that a bunch of parents changed the series and the fans didn't have a say in that. But again, the change in Goldar had already happened before Zed was introduced, so I doubt that Goldar's change was based on any type of parent complaint at all. So I don't know why that ended up happening. And then there is further humiliation to the character of Goldar, and not so much for Rito. Once we get into Zeo and the whole amnesia thing, that also struck me as very odd, because I don't know how they got amnesia in the first place, how they lost the Zeo crystal, particularly when transporting and things of that nature. But seeing them subservient to Bulk and Skull is entertaining. I'll go ahead and grant you that, but it's just not the thing I wanted to go ahead and see from any of those characters. Um, I mean, you know, the thing is that Bulk and Skull were described as a human, squat, and Babu by Rita in White Light, which that's a fair enough comparison and all that. But in a lot of ways, as the series progressed, and again, particularly the first half of Zeo, Goldar and Rito became monster versions of Bulk and Skull. And actually, what I find quite interesting about that is that without their memories, kind of what is Rito and Goldar's default personality? I mean, they have a personality, but they're wiped of all memories. But in a way, they're still the same person. And what is their default? To be subservient, and in a lot of ways to be helpful to Bulk and Skull. Um, Again, we've talked about Finster in the comics and all that, and the way that Kevin was writing him in the comics was that Finster is kind of that, I guess, in what they call that evil and good alignment. He's kind of like neutral evil in a way. And I kind of feel that way for the character of Rito, that Rito isn't like necessarily evil. He's still evil, but he in a way is neutral evil, in the sense that he is only evil because that's what's expected of him. His father is Master Vile. His sister is Rita Repulsa. His brother-in-law is the Emperor of all he sees. That he just kind of had to fit into that. I'm not saying that he's a good character or that he would have chosen to be good, but consider that when he is subservient to Bulk and Skull without knowing his true identity, he and Goldar do a lot of good things together for Bulk and Skull. They help them out. I mean, the fruitcake incident and helping them out with their jobs and all that, and even the cleaning stuff. They're not malevolent. They're not bad. Their personality is basically neutral in a way. And I suspect that had they come across the Rangers instead, and the Rangers had maybe treated them nicely or something, that they could have been allies to the Rangers. I'm not saying that's something that should have happened in the series. What I'm saying is that when you strip away everything, all their memories, and you get down to their core personalities, they are not true evil. They're not typical evil, which kind of leads me to think that maybe when Zordon's wave hit, that maybe they didn't turn into dust. Maybe they were purified like Zed and Rita into humans. I don't know if that's necessarily the case or not, but it's something interesting to go ahead and think about. Um, and so when Rita and Zed come back into the series and they give them their memories, remember when Goldar is dreaming and he's getting this message from Rita and Zed, what does he see? He sees fight footage of him from the first season fighting against Jason, fighting against the Megazord. What sparked his memory, which rekindled those memories in his head, were of him being a fierce warrior, of being that badass that we all knew. But once he gets his memories back, he is his season 3 self again, and Rito returns to his way, but again, not much of a personality change. It's just that who he's loyal to changes, and maybe that's the key there. Rito and Goldar are loyal to Bulk and Skull for helping them, and thus that's why they act kind of the way they do. But when they're loyal to Zed and Rita, then they act evil. So again, in a way, it's that neutral standpoint that I would say, again, at least Rito's not truly evil. Maybe Goldar is. But it's just an interesting thing to think about for those two characters, that's how they are naturally. And then, of course, when they get their memories back, they're in the camper of doom, but not much else changes with them personality-wise, and they're pretty much the same for the rest of the series. And, of course, one of the great shames is that Rito, after Zeo, never returns to the series. And I think that's a great loss because, again, he was a great character. Goldar essentially made cameo appearances in space, but we never really got to interact with him as the character that we once knew, which is a great shame. And even worse is when the 2017 movie came out, Goldar is no longer a character in of himself. He is really just a tool of Rita, a mindless gold fountain, basically, as he's described. So what am I saying ultimately about Rito and Goldar throughout the series? Again, I like them. I really do. I like them as characters. I just don't like what was done to Goldar in the series, and I just question the motivations for making Rito what he was, in essence. And it's not so much like, here's the thing: you had to have Goldar in the first season because you had heavily reliance on Zoo Ranger footage, in which Goldar's counterpart does appear frequently, so you have to make him a character. Now they did that less in the second season, but still kept him around. I would say they probably wanted to keep continuity between the first and second season with the villains, just swap out Rita for Zed, show the new status quo, and then Rito. Keep in mind that the footage of him fighting the Ninja Zords is from the second half of Kaku Ranger, and then beyond that, I don't believe there's any more Sentai footage of Rito's Kaku Ranger counterpart. Um, so that being said, they specifically brought him in this costume, which they only used a fraction of his Sentai footage to film, to do battle with, and then just kept him around for the rest of the series. Oh, and I forgot to mention this. Supposedly, the reason that Rito did not return after Zeo was that the costume that they had for him was destroyed. But I'm a little confused by that because, once again, they only had one costume. They couldn't make another one. They couldn't retrieve another one from Toei. Yeah, that's one of those mysteries that there is no real explanation for, and the explanation they do give sounds like BS. But again, it's odd that once they have these characters in there that they did what they did with them, and I would love to see whether it's in the comics or later down the road in reunion series or whatever, that the characters come back in some capacity, but as much fiercer characters to be reckoned with. I mean, I would have liked if it was Goldar who was his season one self and season three Rito, and then you can get more comedy out of that because you essentially have the straight man and the funny man. Goldar would have been the straight man, Rito obviously the funny man, and I think it would have worked to the advantage of the series, if that's what they had decided to go ahead and do. They didn't. I don't know why, and I would certainly like an explanation for that somewhere down the road. And I'm sure there are a few other things I can go ahead and talk about, but I just really want to go on the idea of these characters, how they've changed so much, and how we kind of view them. And it's just really interesting. We haven't really had a villain duo like that in some time into the series, and we need more characters. Um, they're kind of like Rito and Goldar. Again, Rito has that charm to him, and very few villains, particularly in the Disney and Neo Saban era, really have that charm. I mean, the last one I can really think of that was Rito-like was probably Gendrax from Wild Force. I really liked him, and him and Toxica, I think they worked well together. Beyond that, I can't think of any villains that again have that kind of charm or real staying power from the later seasons. Who knows? Who knows? But I mean, what do you guys think about Rito and Goldar? How do you view them as characters? Which version of Goldar did you like? Did you like how they teamed them up? Would you have preferred Scorpina or Morton to be in the mix in the third season? Leave a comment below and let me know. Um, but yeah, I want to thank you guys for actually listening to me talk on and on about two characters today. I want to thank you for listening. Have a good evening, and the tavern is now closed.